Hey, what's up, guys? It's Apollo Uchiha here, back with another part of What If Naruto Was in a Political Marriage. And before continuing this part, this will be an hour-long video as well. And I'm going to try to complete this series as soon as possible. And that was pretty much it. And today will also be going to be a double upload. And without further ado, let's begin. Oh yeah, guys, if you haven't, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. And without further ado, let's continue our story. Chapter 30. Time skip. 2.5 years later. For Naruto, the training camp had become something of a second home to him. It was where he had fun with his friends who came over to visit. It was where he ate, drank, slept, and trained. It was where he accepted to maintain the will of peace that Jiraiya left him. It was where he spent time with Temari or Fu or Kuretsuchi or Yujito or Mei when she had the time. It was home. Naruto had learned so much from his time there, unadulterated teachings from several very powerful Jonins that specialized in different shinobi fields had given him something of a jack of all trades skill set. Even with his enormous reserves, he had gotten his chakra control to a possible level. He learned how to dispel most genjutsu and how to cast a few low-level illusions. There were few in the training camp who could face with swordsmanship him when he wielded the Nuibari. Through the use of shadow clones, he had mastered control of the wind element and was now adapting to it with Rasengan. He became much more physically fit and imposing, adopting a slim yet fit physique, keeping him agile and strong. Kankuro had even come by at one point to show him the ins and outs of puppet making for his arm. In fact, there were we find him now, hunched over a table and tinkering with his new arm design. See, the thing with his new arm was that it needed a complex series of gears to rotate, aligned with three different axes. Plural of axis, not axe. Located where the radius, humerus, and ulna bones would be. Interconnecting lines of chakra wire were wrapped around at the pivots of the axes, giving them stimulation, requiring to spin and wind like they were supposed to. The actual purpose of this particular arm was to Naruto, Yuichiro said commandingly as she threw the tent flaps open, bringing light to his slightly musky workstation. Naruto jolted away from his arm mechanics, surprised by the sudden intrusion. What is it? Yuichiro looked shaken. She didn't look shaken very often. It's Temari. Yuichiro made more motion with her mouth, but sound did come out. She didn't know how to express what was happening with words. Naruto leapt from his chair and grabbed his new arm. What is it? He asked as he rapidly put his arm into the socket. Her brother Kankuro's dying, and Gaara's got captured by the Akatsuki, Yuichiro finished. Naruto felt his stomach drop at least 3 feet below the recommended limit. He opened and closed his mouth a few times. We have to get them back. Naruto, she said softly. We can't. Tsunade said, but she got cut off. I don't give a actual fuck what she said. Naruto said coldly. We've gotten stronger. We've gotten really strong. We can do this. The only reason Temari is alive is because Akatsuki decided not to kill her. Something so much worse could have happened this time. What if you lose more than your arm at this time? That's not going to happen. Naruto began running around the tent in search of his new ninja items. Where's Temari right now? He asked as he started wrapping the Nuibari's blade with bandages. It didn't have a sheet, so he had to wraith the entire thing with wrappings to make sure he didn't cut anything by accident. Thematic tent. Why she's there? Actually, no, it doesn't matter. Who do we have? We're not doing a rescue mission. You could get hurt. Naruto finished strapping on all of his essential ninja gear that he had on him in the tent. He then stood up straight, slightly under Yuichiro's height at this point, and looked at her in the eyes. I'm going to rescue Gaara and save Kankuro. You can come if you want. Naruto then brushed past her and headed into the camp. He didn't make it very far though. Yuichiro clamped a hand on his shoulder and held him in place. I'm not going to let you go off and kill yourself, she said angrily. Naruto clenched and unclenched his fist furiously. I have to save him. Naruto stuttered out. He's just like me. He's just like us. That has to that has to count for something, he said in a subdued tone. Yujito closed her eyes and looked away in annoyance. This was really bad. Yujito had gotten explicit instructions from the Hokage that they wouldn't be allowed to engage any of the Akatsuki unless they got her say so. Although they had all gotten really strong through the training camp, Yujito still wasn't sure how well they would be able to hold up themselves against the Akatsuki members. Then again, she had seen for herself how much they had all come since entered the camp 2.5 years ago. To say that they had gotten strong in their own pursuits would be an understatement. She finally sighed and muttered out, "Okay, we're going to save your friend." Naruto smiled at her before he got pulled by her in the direction of the center camp area. "Where are we going?" he asked. "Medic tent." Link break. Sometime later. "You have to help me," Tamari shouted at the pink-haired medic ninjutsu instructor. Sakura sheepishly rubbed the back of her head. I asked us against two Akatsuki members would be suicide. I'm sorry, but your brothers and all." She was got out. "Yusha's coming too," Tamari said impatiently. I think I haven't actually talked to her about it. "But she will, I promise." "So am I," a weak voice said from the side. Sakura snapped her head in the direction of the voice. "No, you aren't. Food poisoning is a serious ailment. You wouldn't last 2 seconds in a fight." Kuratsuchi grumbled to herself a little bit. Fu weakly raised an arm for her prone position on the examining table, but got a stern look from Sakura. The night before they had eaten bad sushi apparently. The morning after they were nauseous and vomiting all over the tent. Tamari tapped her foot agitatedly. The Jonin instructors were in the process of switching out and left the camp, practically desolate of anyone higher than Chunin level. The only ones there who were above Chunin level were Naruto, Yujito, Tamari, Fu, Kuratsuchi, Sakura, and Shizune. Shizune wasn't too good at frontline combat, and Fu and Kuratsuchi were out of sickness. The tent flaps flew open as Yujito and Naruto entered. "Yujito!" Tamari exclaimed. "Listen, we have to rescue them." Yujito nodded quickly. "I know," she said with a sense of finality. "Who do we have that's coming?" Tamari shrugged her shoulders hopelessly. "It's only me, and that poisoning thing that's in Conquerors is beyond the expertise of Sand. Is there anyone here that can cure it?" Yujito was in pure reactionary mode. No emotion, no pragmatic assessments. "I can," Sakura offered with a little unsureness. "But Naruto, it's the Akatsuki. The last time I faced them, I was so much weaker than I am now. Please, you have to help us," Naruto asked pleadingly. "We can do this. We have to do this." Sakura looked at each of them in turn. Tamari had a pleading and worried expression on her face. Naruto looked more serious than was normal for him. Understandable given the situation, and Yujito looked at everything with a cold ruthlessness. It was Yujito who really got her attention. She reminded Sakura of Kakashi Sensei. She might not have the most dependable personality, but she was a good shinobi who knew how to lead other shinobi. If Naruto was putting all of his trust into those two, the least she could do would be same. "How did we get this information?" she said, finally asked. "By Falcon," Tamari immediately supplied. "It would take a Falcon about 2 hours to get from Sand to here." "Did it say anything other than Kankuro being hurt and Gaara being captured?" "It said that other 2 Falcons were also en route to the major villages. There was also information that there were only 2 Akatsuki members, the Idara of the explosive style and Sorcery of the puppet style." "Did it mention the extent of Conqueror's injuries?" "The wound was treated, but they don't know what the poison is." Sakura bit her knuckles. "Okay," she said. "I'll go along with you, but we have to get to Suna before we start tracking Gaara. Let me go get my gear." Sakura disappeared somewhere into another section of the medic tent. Even though her battle fan was securely on her back, Tamari had a tightened grip on it. Her knuckles were turning white and she was biting her lip. Despite her fears, there was a look of determination and even anger on her face. Naruto lightened a hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry," he said. "We'll get your brothers back." She gave him a small smile. Her features lightened up, if only slightly. "Thanks, Naruto." Fu tried to get up from the examination table but failed utterly. Despite that, she still felt the need of comfort to Temari. Don't worry, Sakura's a great medic. She's safe, conquer. Oh. Fu immediately grabbed the bucket that was near her and proceeded to hurl chunks into it explosively. Once she was quite done and everyone said Kurtsuchi took a step away from her, she sighed exasperately. Was it that only Kurtsuchi and I got food poisoning? You had the sushi too. I don't know, Sakura said as she entered the main part of the tent. Shizune going to look after you, but it's definitely not food poisoning. Kurtsuchi and Fu blasted. What? Kurtsuchi said, is there something wrong with us? I don't know. Didn't check. Shizune is going to look after you. You're fine, don't worry. Sakura said rapid fire. Are you guys ready? She said. There was a round of nods. Team Yujito move out. The Nibi Jinchuriki said to all of them. The four of them sped out of the tent, leaving a slightly confused Fu and Kurtsuchi. Link break. Several hours later. They were pushing themselves too hard, Yujito decided. Temari and Naruto was running at a destructively fast pace with no sign of stopping. She had no trouble keeping up with them, but Sakura was lagging behind slightly. Naruto, Temari, slow down, Yujito ordered, but they were cut out. That's an order, she said sternly. Sakura can't keep up, and you'll tire yourself out before you even reach the desert. Fighting the Katsuki on tired legs isn't a good idea if you don't know. Temari and Naruto reluctantly slowed their pace. They were both worried beyond beliefs, and this fact was evident on their face. Temari's brow was constantly furrowed, and Naruto's expression had lightened up in the slightest since their departure. Yujito almost broke her stoic commander expression to sigh. She had actually met the two Sabuko brothers a while ago. They were nice. Well, Kankuro seemed nice, but had an abrasive front, and Gara was just too quiet for her to get much of any read on him. They were, however, genuine with their feelings and didn't let things like status or strength get in the way of knowing people. Yujito had taken quite a shine to them and was just worried when she first heard the news. Since then, she had gotten rid of her emotions in the matter in order to better act accordingly to the situation. Emotions almost always get in the way of missions, especially rescue missions. Sakura caught up to Yujito while she was musing about the fates of the two brothers and tried to strike up a conversation. I've never seen him like this before. Yujito broke out of her reverie. She hummed for clarification. Naruto. I've never seen him act so serious before. Well, I have seen him serious, but never at this level. It's really disarming. Yujito glanced at the target of their conversation. Indeed, while he had matured greatly over the years, Naruto always remained carefree and confident, and more than a little stubborn. Sometimes he got annoying, but he always did the best he could to cheer her up when she was down, or give her a massage when she was feeling tense, or even just lay next to her so she could cuddle up and sleep soundly. He was something of a security blanket for her. It really was disarming to see him like this. Yeah, it is kind of weird, she said quietly. So neither Naruto or Temari could hear. Sakura was silent while she figured out how to phrase her next question. Hey, I know this is kind of a personal question, but how do you feel about Naruto? Yujito gave a sideways glance. He's nice, I guess. So she wasn't the most eloquent of speakers. Sue her. No, I mean, how do you feel towards him? He never really talks about his romantic life all that much when we're around. I want to make sure he's alright. Yujito gave a small huff of amusement. Well, you won't have to worry much about that. Every other night, he, Fu, and Kurtsuchi are loud enough to wake the whole camp. Sakura nearly tripped on the next branch she jumped to. So they fucked each other that night, she said without breaking her expression at all. I see. I didn't know he was romantically involved with both of them, and I didn't know they were sexually active. Do you know how long they've been doing this? 6 months. I guess it was around Naruto's 16th birthday. I see, Sakura said, troubled by this new information. Yujiro gave her a queer look. Is something the matter? Well, no. It's just Naruto doesn't have the best sense of foresight in this world. I worry for him. I'm afraid he's going to get hurt. Plus, there's way too young to be having sex for him. Fu's 17, Kuretsuchi's 18, Naruto's 16. They just about sexual peak for them. Yuito said with little emotion. It wasn't like she was very troubled by this information. They loved each other and they wanted to show their love through copious acts of sexual intercourse. The only thing that really bothered her was the loss of sleep she had been getting for 6 months. The three were really loud when they were in the act. I know their bodies are really ready for it, but the brain doesn't stop developing until 21. They might make bad decisions on spur of the moment type situations. Are you sure they're using the anti-pregnancy? I don't know. I didn't ask. But considering neither of them are pregnant, I'd hazard a yes. Sakura went silent for a while as she proceeded this conversation. Do you love him then? Not to be rude or anything, but you gave off this cold and unfeeling vibe. Well, I love him, Yuito said unflinchingly. Sakura almost tripped once again, but through the use of ninja reflexes, managed to right herself without losing any ground. Is that so? At the sight of her shock and dismay, Yuito retiredly tried. I love him like a brother. Honestly, I'm 29. He's a little too young for me. Sakura made an sound and fell quiet, although a certain Hellcat had other plans for disrupting the silence of her thoughts. Yuchito's mind. Nimbi talking to Yuchito. Hey Yuchito, speaking of sexual intercourses with your lovely husband, I have a question. Yuchito would have clenched the bridge of her nose if it weren't for the fact that this would break the commander facade. Yes, she asked Nibi. Can I give it a go? Well, Yuchito was definitely not anticipating this question. What? I want to feel what sex is like, so can I have a go? It doesn't have to be right this minute. What do you mean, have a go? Well, ideally I would take over your body for hours. No, of course not. Why not? She asked in a whiny voice. Because that would be the weirdest thing in this world. For you to take control of my body and have sex with a 16-year-old. You just said that he reached sexual peak. Why would that be so bad? Because that would mess up our relationship. And why are you so obsessed with sex anyways? You don't have any gonads. Curiosity, I want to know. What makes that fool scream so loud? I wouldn't really mess up your relationship much, I promise. I really doubt sweet little Naruto of all people would want to turn down a being that only wants to know what the carnal pleasures are like. You aren't having sex with Naruto, using my body, and his conversation is over. There are more important things to be talking about right now, like battle strategies. Do you really think those two are in any right mind to be talking about battle strategies? No, they didn't not. But you didn't want to give Matatabi the satisfaction of being right. We aren't talking about sex while Gaara and Kankuro might be in more trouble. Matatabe. All three of her traveling companions whirled their heads suddenly towards her direction. Yuito looked around trying to figure out what they were looking at before realizing that she was the subject of their gaze. We aren't doing what now? Tomari asked. Yuito quirked a brow in confusion before coming to a sudden realization. I said that out loud, didn't I? Naruto snickered. Then he started giggling, which turned into full-blown laughter. This laughter quickly caught on to Tamari and Sakura. Soon enough they were all laughing heartedly at the slip of the tongue Yuito made. There was a small dusting of red on her Yuito's face. Even in the back of her mind, she could hear the Nibis laughing quietly. It was strangely noise by any definition, but she still knew that Matatabe was laughing at her. Well, there goes the stoic commander fake it. Link break. Meanwhile, Deidara and Sasori were having a pretty good time, or at least a pretty good time in comparison to the last couple of years. Actually getting a Jinchuriki without fuss. No other Jinchuriki coming to the rescue. No need of wearing a stifled tuxedo or using practically useless marble statue puppets. Nope. They came, they saw, they conquered. And it was relieving. The past 2.5 years had been practically fruitful for the Akatsuki. In fact, the only Jinchuriki left were the Nibi, the Nanabi, the Hachibi, and the Kyubi. But that was a decision of another time. Right now, Deidara only wanted to leisurely stroll out of the wind country, get with extracting the Ichibi and collecting his gratitudes. Sasori just had to ruin it though. We need to move faster, came the gravelly voice of Sasori. Huh? But Sasori, my man, Sand'll never catch up with us with all the false leads we sent. Might as well enjoy a walk. Do you have any clay left? You could easily just make a bird to fly us. Anyways. Sorry, Sasori, my man. I'm out of the why they need to go faster anyways? The training camp is only a few hours from the border. Sand has no doubt sent a falcon their way. What can they do? They join in our own rotations before they even manage to muster up any sort of force to be reckoned with. We'll be long gone. What about the other Chinchurikis, their annoying ones? You think the other nations are going to risk losing them again? Yeah. Sasori grumbled a little bit in discontent. He had a really bad feeling about this for some reason. Link break. A few hours later, the Wind Country's sun was poison panting the sandy surfaces of the dunes and rock structures. A bright pink and orange Yuito raised a hand, forcing the three following behind her to stop. Sakura and Temari were running ragged at this point. The only difference between the two being Temari wanted to continue running at the pace set by Yuito, and Sakura unspoken want to stop and rest. We'll stop here for the night, Yuito said to them. They were in a ridge between two massive sand dunes. Darkness had already fallen on them. By means of the great shadow the dune in front of them threw downwards, we're only half a day from Suna. Temari said breathlessly. If we can get there, Kankuro has a higher chance of surviving. If we ran full speed in cold darkness towards a very own alert village of ninjas, we have a higher chance of death than Kankuro ever will, Ishida said coldly. Temari kind of crumpled inward on herself and fell to her knees. Even with her prosthetic running through the forest and then the desert was obviously far too taxing on her body to handle. There was no way she was running for half of a day, even if she tried. Sakura fell to the ground as well to get a good breather whilst unsealing a few camping supplies. Naruto helped her pitching both tents and getting a smolder fire going. The fact that they had sand as a natural isolator helped with the process, but it also hampered their ability to make any sort of holes in the ground, meaning the light from their fire would reach anyone who had a clear view into their reach between the dunes. While they were doing this, Temari was checking her prosthetic for its full functionality, and Yuito was using Matatabe's ability to sense body heat to track down some food. Soon enough, they were all sitting around a small campfire and tending to some cooking lizards. The meat was slightly stringy, but still juicy, and definitely way better than soldier pills and military rations. Temari had her arm wrapped around her knees and was looking at the fire with a cold expression. Naruto sat by her side and wrapped an arm around her. No words were spoken. There wasn't any need. Temari and Naruto hadn't even thought about starting any romance with the others during the 2.5 years since we last saw them. It wasn't that she didn't want to. It just really never crossed her mind to do so. She was more focused on getting stronger as a shinobi than her romantic life with Naruto. And Naruto didn't want to approach her needlessly and get her worked up and confused. That being said, they still enjoyed a close relationship. They were the only ones who knew what it was like to have a part of themselves missing. So they understood each other, at least on a subconscious level. Whatever the case was, Temari leaned into Naruto's embrace and rested her head on his shoulder. Naruto rubbed her shoulder affectionately. When they were running through the desert and Yuito thought their emotions calmed down a bit, she went over a battle strategy for defeating the two. If they were the two, they meet. Temari would engage Deidara if he ever took flight, with Naruto running interferences from the ground using some of his long-ranged ninjutsus, learning during the 2.5 years hiatus. Yuito and Sakura would engage Sasori, with Yuito using her half transformation and Sakura sneaking into his blind side to strike. It was a good plan as they could come up with what with the motley crew assorted. If I could just expound my desire. Oh, not this again. I really am just curious about the whole sex thing. If you want, you can do a transformation and make it so you look nothing like yourself. What's wrong with that? So much could go wrong. What if you time out in the act and I end up with him? What's so wrong with that again? I don't get why you're so adamant about not wanting to have sex with him. You love each other and you both are sexually viable. Because I don't love him that way. I'm calling bullshit on that one. If you hadn't noticed, I'm inside of you. I have a great viewpoint on your entire body processes. Whenever you two are together, your body fluids with DHEA and estrogen, your mouth gets dry, blood gets focused at your more erogenous zones. Your mental faculties started to slow. That doesn't happen. Yes, it does, Matatabe replied incredulously. When you two are curled up for sleep, you get horny as fuck. I am not going to start anything with him, and neither are you. What are you so scared of? That he's going to reject you? Do you honestly think he'd reject you? He has absolutely no qualms with sharing, and it is evident that he loves you too. You sleep in the same bed almost every night, for God's sake. People who are just friendly don't do that sort of thing. I am not afraid of that. So you are afraid of something then? What is it? It can't be that you don't think it feels good. Those two are too vocal about their pleasures for you to think that. I'm not afraid of that either. Well, what is it? Are you afraid of telling him? I'm a goddamn voice in your head, and it doesn't get more private than that. I'm not afraid of anything. Matatabe was silent for a bit, wondering what she should say next. Just as Yuito was about to get up from the fire and go to bed, Matatabe whispered something that made her stop dead cold. Maybe it's not that you're afraid of admitting it to me, so much as you're afraid of admitting it to yourself. With that being said, the giant hellcat curled up in her big cage and started to sleep again. Yujito looked back down at the fire once more, deep in thoughts. Her musing as well as everyone else were cut short by the explosions rocketed their campsite. Link break. A few hours ago, the medic tent, both Kurtsuchi and Fu were in an unhealthy green color. While Shizune had gone to do some tests to verify some conclusions, they were left to their own devices, namely puking in buckets provided to them. Only once there was nothing left to come up did they stop heaving, but they kept the stinky buckets handy just in case. Neither of them said anything. They were too afraid of opening their mouths for the fear that they would start hurling again. A good amount of time passed before Shizune entered the room again and set her clipboard down on a nearby flat surface. She opened her mouth to speak but changed what she was saying immediately as soon as she realized they wouldn't be able to talk back to her in their states. After a few touches with mystic palms, they were still woozy but capable of speech and thought once more. I'm going to ask you a few questions. Is that alright? Yes, both said. Have you eaten anything strange in the past few days? It was Kursuichi who answered. We had some bad sushi. I see. Have either of you been suffering from under any other alignments previous to the bad sushi? Both shook their heads. Is your diet healthy? Both nodded their heads. Have you been doing any strenuous activities as of late? We've been training, Fu said, but not more than usual, Kurtsuchi supplied. Are either of you sexually active? Both trepidatiously nodded their heads, Fu getting a little blush on her face, but Kurtsuchi's expression remained stoic. I'm assuming this is with Naruto only. No other partners? Nope, no other partners, Fu said. Have both of you been using the anti-pregnancy jutsu? Of course we have, Kurtsuchi said. We can't afford to get pregnant. Do you use any other supplementary birth control? They shook their heads. And when you are copulating, does he ejaculate inside of you? Kurtsuchi scratched her cheek nervously. Sometimes. Fu nervously nodded to Kurtsuchi's sentiments. I suppose that makes sense now. Shizune grinned lightly at the two. So, I have some good news or I have some bad news. Isn't it good news and bad news? Kurtsuchi asked. It really depends on your view in the situation. What situation? We ate some bad sushi. We just got some food poisoning. Shizune grabbed her clipboard and showed it to the two on the examining table. That wasn't food poisoning, that was morning sickness. Kurtsuchi and Fu grabbed both ends of the clipboard and read furiously the contents of the book. Congratulations, you two are pregnant. Chapter 31. The beginning of the middle of the end. Many people are afraid of a lot of different things. Some are irrationally afraid of spiders, some are irrationally afraid of vampires, some are even afraid of words consisting of more than 7 syllables. Then there are people who are rationally afraid of things. Things like very deadly poisons or explosions or unplanned pregnancy. It doesn't matter what you're rationally or irrationally afraid of. It doesn't matter what you're the most confident and fearless person in the world. Even queers at the side of the two-tailed firecat the size of a 50-story building running towards you at a breakneck speed. And that's just what the people of Suna did. After their strongest shinobi and leader was captured by a group of S-rank criminals, after his brother was declared good for dead by hospital doctors, after all their hope was lost, there appeared a giant biju charging their gates. People don't act rationally in irrational situations. Everyone can plan ahead of the times what they would do if they found themselves in a giant spider web. But nobody knows what they would actually do when entrapped in one. There are plans and procedures with how to handle biju charging their gates. But the shinobi at the wall that are tasked with the safety of Suna didn't remember that in the face of fearsome sight. At a third-person perspective, a perspective devoid of any sense of danger or fear, one would see that the two-tailed cat didn't look like it was charging their gates so much as it was running there haphazardly, fearful, afraid even. Although the fire coming from her body illuminated the dark night, didn't help matter much for the people with the first perspective. Isn't human nature such a funny thing? Fire everything! A shinobi sat somewhere in the ranks of men and women in charge of the safety of thousands of civilians. Great chunks of rocks flew from the walls and impacted the cat with muted thuds. The cat screamed in pain from the blunt force's trauma, but the rocks didn't have the heft to signify hamper its speed. Fan wielders were furiously throwing everything in the tower at the cat, everything from wind bullets to great gusts with hidden wind blades in them, anything to hurt the giant harbinger of death. There was even a Jonin who used some water reserves to throw a water dragon missile at the beast. It hit Matatabe in the side of the face, covering her in water and closing one of her eyes from the force. She kept on trying to speak and showing them that she wasn't in just a charging beast, but was evidently unable to. Only grabbing, slightly threatening sound came from her larynx. No, stop fighting! Baki, one of the only people in Suna who had an in-depth knowledge and experience in dealing with Jinchuriki and their tail beast, shouted out above the chaos. When none of the shinobi ceased fire, he roughly grabbed the nearest Chunin by the leaves of his jacket and shouted in his face, "She's an ally! Stop fighting!" The man stamped a little bit and fell on his ass. He crawled away from the Jonin and ran towards the village. It wasn't like he could blame any of them. No Suna resident had any good experience with Biju, Tanuki, or otherwise. Baki went across the sandstone ridge, slapping the nonsense out of anyone still throwing jutsus, but the time half of them were scared out of their minds into assuming the fatal position. Matatabe had limped to the crack in the wall and collapsed under her weight. The flames dissipated slowly until they were revealed the presence of 4 people. Baki jumped down to meet the 4. He noticed that they were all unconscious. They were Yujito, Ni Jinchuriki of the Nibi, Tamari sister of the Kazekage, and unknown pink one, and holy shit, Baki whispered. He kneeled down and lifted the last Jinchuriki's face from the desert sand. His eyes were blacked over from a lack of sleep. His hair was as red as rust. His sand armor was falling from his face and body in chunks. The last person of their quarter was a Gara no Sabuko, Jinchuriki of the One Tail, Kazekage of village hidden in the sand. A voice uttered from the others. Baki checked to make sure Gara was okay before moving over to the pink-haired one to check her vitals. She sat up and leaned on one of her elbows, rubbing her head with a grimace on her face. "Are you okay?" Baki asked her. When she didn't reply right away, Baki called backwards, "Get them to safety, they're allies." Sakura looked around a little bit, trying to get her bearings. "Where's Naruto?" she murmured out unintelligibly. Baki sent his attention back to Sakura just as some medics came by with stretchers. "What's that?" he asked. Sakura's eyes went wide and she began to look everywhere for the blonde. "Where's Naruto?" she cried out hysterically. Baki did a quick scan of the dark desert. There were no other people than him. and the four who traveled there via Biju. There was no sign of the blonde-haired Jinchuriki. Naruto Uzumaki was missing or captured. Link break. Many hours later. Many hours ago, Fu and Kurtsuchi were shocked into silence. Shizune did kinda smile grimace evidently. They were not happy by this new information. Then again, what was she expecting? For them to jump in air with joy? For them to suddenly start cheering and crying their exhalations? No, they were just teenagers who found out they were pregnant. They wouldn't put people into any sort of good mood. Fu closed her mouth and looked at the ground with thousand-yard stare. Kurtsuchi gripped the clipboard with enough force to shatter the flimsy wood and glared at the medic practitioner in front of her. What do you mean, pregnant? She growled out. Perhaps at this point they would respond better to bluntness. I mean, there's a fetus growing in your womb. You should be at about 6 to 7 weeks into your pregnancy. At this point, if you're just starting to get morning sickness, but we really should get you checked out with full hospital compliments. Medical ninjutsu can only tell us so much about. Get it out of me. Shizune stopped mid-speech and looked at the black-haired girl in confusion. What? Get it out of me. If you want me to perform an abortion, then you should really think about this situation a bit. I don't care what I have to do. I don't care what I have to sign. And I don't care who does it. I just need it out of me. Shizune looked at the girl sternly. That choice is not something to be taken lightly. If you don't want to carry his child, then you should at least talk to him about it. Where is he anyway? I sent someone to fetch him, and he isn't here yet. Didn't Sakura tell you? He left to help his friend Gaara. Kurtsuchi tried to look at Fu for support, but she was still out of it. If Sakura didn't tell Shizune the details of what was going on, Kurtsuchi didn't think it would make much difference if she told Shizune. Well, when he comes back, talk to him. I get that this situation isn't ideal, but you don't know what could happen if you don't communicate. Shizune leaned down in front of Kurtsuchi and picked up the shattered remains of her clipboard. The conversation evidently being done, Kurtsuchi grabbed a hold of Fu and brusquely walked out of the tent. Fu followed behind, stumbling slightly over the ground. Kurtsuchi had some steam to blow off and some things to destroy. Link break. Many hours later, the water went up to his wrist. Normally he didn't feel the water or was impeded much by it being there. Now it was cold and thick. Naruto could barely move through it. Are you happy now? Naruto didn't answer. He stared at the floor below him, or at least tried to. The water was really murky at that point. What the fuck is wrong with you? Naruto remained silent. Not in a talking mood, huh? The Kyuubi said sarcastically. Not that I can really blame you. Naruto opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. What is going to make you change, huh? What's going to stop you from running headfirst into situations that you hadn't planned out with the idea that you were going to kick ass and take names? You didn't, and you don't, by the way. The only thing you accomplish is putting yourself, the people around you, and most importantly me, in danger. I had to do something. Something. What? While waiting for reinforcements for any of the other villages that received word of Gaara's capture, did you even consider doing that? But nothing. That girl you love, Kurtsuchi, she almost died because of your hubris. And so did Choume's container. She got half her fucking skin blown off. Everything you do always ends up fucked, beyond all repair to the end. Temari got her leg ripped off. Sasuke, you were able to save him for himself. You even had a giant sharkman bite your arm off. What is it that's going to make you change? That's going to make you think of things other than what sounds ideal to you? I had to try and save Sasuke. I had to try to save Yagra. I had to try and save Gaara. And yet, you failed on 2 of those accounts and got yourself killed on the 3rd. Face it, you're a fucking failure. I am not dead yet, and I am not a failure. Everything you do is a failure. If it weren't for me, you'd be dead in 10 times over. When it is that you're going to start to look at things differently, that you're going to take a step back from situation and say, hey, maybe I shouldn't do the dumbest thing to do in the world. Maybe I should wait for backup or not endanger my friends. Naruto started to stare at the murky water without saying anything. The QB sat down in its cage and laid its head in its hand. After 2.5 years of getting pestered endlessly by the kid, it had actually taken not a liking, more like a lack of disliking. If there was one thing that the kid did, it was to actually treat Kurama like a person, not a thing to make him stronger. It cracked an eye open to see what Naruto was doing. It heard some form of muted shuffling coming from the kid. Naruto had a hand on his stomach. The fingers were curled inwardly and spaced apart evenly. What are you doing? I'm going to undo the seal. I'm going to set you free, Naruto said with a little difficulty. He was nervous. Jiraiya had entrusted him with the key to the seal only months prior to Gaara's rescue mission. You'll die, and you'll survive. You ask me what's going to make me change, but I don't think I'm going to change. When I see someone in danger that I can save, my body reacts against my will. I can't help it. I have to try my hardest to save the people who are precious to me. I can't take half measures and I can't sit around twiddling my thumbs when they might be dying or dead. If I don't, then what's the point trying to get people who are precious to you? Kid, stop it. You can survive this. I won't either way. You're going to make it out, the Cuban said tiredly. Do you really think Matatabe is going to let you die? No, she's going to try her hardest to rescue the rescuer. I thought you'd be willing to do anything for freedom. Are you sure you want to give it up so easily? If I survive, you die. I just know Chaume and Matatabe are going to pester me for the rest of my life. Naruto laughed a dark little short laugh. You kept on telling me how you're the greatest Bijo of all. How you could take on all the rest of them at once and come on top. What can Matatabe and Chaume do to you? Stop questioning my logic, kid, Kurama said stubbornly. Naruto looked at the greatest beast in front of him, held apart by its cage and a flimsy-looking piece of paper in confusion. At a few seconds of thinking out of the conversation with Kurama, saw a very huge grin spread on his face. You know what I think? Naruto asked. When the beast didn't respond, Naruto went on. I think that you like me. What? Kurama asked, genuinely perplexed by this question. I'm offering you your freedom, the thing that you spent nearly all your life inside my gut wishing for, and you don't want it, because it caused my death. His hand, which was still resting on his stomach, fell to the side. You like me, don't you? That's the dumbest thing I have ever heard. Naruto smirked. No, it's not, he said in an annoyingly sing-song voice. Kurama huffed and curled up into his comfortable position. Think whatever you want, kid. We're going to be in here for a while until your friends come to save you. Naruto consented and sat down in the lotus position. If he kept in his back straight, the water would only go up to his neck. He was able to sit silently for a solid 5 seconds before he spoke again. Hey QB, what is it, annoying human? Tell me a story. Large fox cracked open its eye once more. You want me to what? A story. You have to have at least few stories, right? The QB caused a flicked one of its fingers to show how the objects didn't actually interested it at the moment. One or two, I suppose. Link break. Outside of the mindscape, Deidara breathing was getting raised and Sorcery went to work on the stump of his leg. Honestly, it wasn't life-threatening, and as soon as they met up with Kakazu, he could use his ability to sew it back on with no less of control. Sorcery was really only treating it for pain, as it was at this point he was down an arm and leg. The arm from fighting with Gaara and the leg from fighting his sister. Deidara let out a howl of sound of pain when Sorcery drenched the stump with antibacterial soaps. When he gave up his biological body for a puppet one, he lost the ability to make elements or medical flavored chakra. He was able to control other puppets with the affinities to do what he wanted, but he didn't have any medical shinobi puppet on him. To traditional medicals and medicines they went, as it were. Stop being such a baby, came the gravelly voice of Sorcery. Whatever, man, Deidara said through clenching teeth. You're a fucking puppet. Yeah, you don't know what it feels like to lose an arm and a leg. I could make this much more unpleasant, you know, Sorcery said as he unrolled bandages using his unwieldy outer puppet shell. Whatever, you tall piece of... Sorcery was applying much more pressure than necessary when bandaging up his leg. You were saying, I hate you. Yeah. Deidara made a head motion to Naruto's limp form. What are the rest going to think when they see we brought the wrong Jinchuriki? We've gotten to the point where it doesn't really matter which pattern we collect them in. They're going to be more pissed when they find out we lost two other Jinchurikis. Deidara grunted and clenched his eyes. So you want to tell me why we're allowed to kill the brat? No, as opposed to when I was in a fucking tuxedo. Back then we didn't know the villages were as disjointed as they are. Even now, when they're all in an alliance, they won't be capable of retaliation against us. So we're taking the QB. We're going back for Nibi or Ichibi. I have a feeling the Nibi is going to be coming back for us. As for Ichibi, you still have an arm and a leg. I am sure you'd be able to get up in no time for a repeat for performance. You got the Jinchuriki with your special poison. You sure she's going to be coming back? Deidara shouted out as Sasori finished knotting the bandage. There was a medic with them, and she didn't seem too injured by the fight. My paralysis toxin is special made to knock out Jinchurikis, but it can be extracted and rendered null quite easily with a skilled medic. I'm sure we're going to be seeing her soon sometime later. Now get up, we're going to start sealing. You're just lucky we found a clay deposit, else I'll be carrying the remains along with the brat. Sasori made to get up, but Deidara grabbed his tail, keeping him in place. Oi, you're going to have to carry me. Can't you just make some sort of support? I'm weak enough as it is. Yeah, you're carrying me to the base. What's wrong with carrying me to the stump? Sasori grumbled to himself unintelligibly as he grabbed Deidara roughly by the midsection using his personal tail, and as he threw the bomber on top of the stump and hopped up to his own. 8 other projections made their appearance in that same moment at the corresponding stumps. After a little back and forth explaining their situation, they all began the hand seals to start the extraction. A red and blue cloud enveloped Naruto, and a streak of red emanating from his gut floated up to the statue's mouth. The destruction of the QB has begun. Link break. Many hours before. Generally, as a rule, the people at the training camp tried to cause as little destruction to the surrounding forestry as possible. They went to the clearing to practice fire, wind, and lightning techniques, mountains to practice stones techniques, and rivers and lakes to practice water techniques. Destruction of forestry, although proves to be a greatest stress reliever, isn't advocated for and can get you in a lick of trouble if you do it too much. The main problem being the creation of an eyesore. Who wants to see piles of rotting, splintered wood stench on the fields and fields? Well, at least Kurotsuchi was taking responsibility for it, covering the remains with coangling quicklime. Fu looked on from a safer distance as the lava release user continued to relieve her stress in the second best way known to her. It was really terrifying sight. Kurotsuchi had grown a lot in her 2.5-year hiatus, if not in body proportions, then at least in combat powers. She was securely one of the most dangerous people in the camp at close-range combats, using her short sword and hand-picked a variety of supplementary and mid-range jutsus. Kurotsuchi also showed an ability to grasp complicated chemistry theories for the use of her jutsu. For example, she figured out how to spawn solid quicklime when bonded together and hit with water. They became unbearably hot as they began to corrode into their baser form. Basically, with the help of a little synchronous jutsu, she could create flying chunks of scouring hot rocks that could blind and lessen her opponent's movement. Although her close-range combat needed an agile body, that didn't stop her from doing muscular workout to improve her ability to block hits from stronger foes instead of always sparing them. Fu didn't really know what to make of the situation. Pregnancy, of all things in her future, was probably one of the things she least thought about. Bringing a child into this world, raising a human being as her own, that hadn't really clicked for her yet. Fu rested a hand on her abdomen. Was there really a child there? Was there really a developing human being inside of her? The more she thought about it, the more she didn't want to think about it. This was she thought about it. a vicious cycle by any means. She couldn't be doing that, a stoic old voice said from behind her. Fu swirled her head around to see Shino Aburame standing her looking at Kurtsuchi demolishing the forestry. They met short after the ball and were quite fond of each other. Through his teaching, she found out that Chomi's chakra has the ability to give her control over bugs. Ever since then, they often met to trade notes on various breeding projects that they had. Although, since she wasn't an Aburame, she kept her collection of insects within her body length red tube, not within her actual person. So long as they had a basic source of food, were saturated with Chomi's chakra, they were completely obedient. I know, Fu said as a faraway voice. Destruction of forestry and all, sorry. Um, I'm more concerned about her pregnancy. Shino said pragmatically. She couldn't be exercising as much as she is. It might be bad for the fetus. Are you sure? She's not that pregnant at the moment. Fu cut herself off suddenly and looked sharply at Shino. How did you know she was pregnant? A tiny beetle flew from Shino's hoodie and flew around a little bit. My Kikachu are capable of a lot of things other than just draining chakra. Things like sucking minuscule amount of blood, finding death, and smelling pregnancy pheromones. I've known you two were pregnant for about 3 days after it was conceived. You didn't say anything? Who said in a non-believing tone of voice. Shino furrowed his eyebrows. I assumed that you either wanted to keep it a secret or just didn't like me enough to tell me the news, so I didn't pray. Fu's shoulders slumped drastically. She knew she should be angry at this somehow, but wasn't exactly in the mood for it. She never frowned either. Is something the matter? He asked. Fu sighed a long, deep sigh. You may have known we were pregnant for 7 weeks, but we just found out now. Shino was silent, shocked into silence, not the only normal Shino silence. I'm sorry, Fu. I wasn't under the assumption that you knew. I would have spoken sooner, but I was fearful of overstepping my friendliness. As he was saying this, his eyebrow twitched. Wait, how did you not know? It's been almost 2 months. You have to have missed at least one period. Is it missing a period every now and then normal? Shino slowly shook his head. No, it's not. You should have paid more attention in health class. Fu did a dark half smile. Yeah, I should have. Shino sat down next to her, continued to watch as Kurtsuchi worked her frustration out. It was comfortable silence. Fu didn't mind the company as she continued to contemplate her situation, and Shino got a front row seat to Forest Destruction Derby 10. He was still worried that Kurtsuchi might overdo it, but there was no way in hell he was getting in the way of a pregnant woman releasing her frustration. Are you going to keep it? He asked suddenly. Once he realized how personal the question he asked was, he quickly tried to retaliate it in a more diplomatic way, but was interrupted by Fu. She took a deep breath and let it out slowly. When she stopped, she waited a few more seconds before responding. Yeah, I guess I have to, don't I? You shouldn't feel pressured by anyone to make this decision for you. Fu plucked out a few strands of grass from the ground next to her and started idly playing with it. It's not that, it's just this baby. She laid a hand on her abdomen. Deserves a chance. Everybody deserves a chance. Doesn't matter if you're born from a convict seed, born from a noble seed, born from a Jinchuriki, or born from a Jinchuriki. Everyone deserves a chance. The birds chirped in the air, bugs buzzed around in their own special way, grass swayed in the breeze, and trees fell from an irate evening. Peaceful by the definition of most ninja. That's remarkably mature of you, Fu, Shino stated. The grass stem in her hand started to tremble and fall to the ground. Tears were beginning to gather in her eyes. But I'm still scared. She whispered hoarsely. What if I'm not a good mother? What if Naruto doesn't want it? How am I going to raise it? Tears began to flow from her eyes in earnest. Shino, for his part, wasn't the greatest at comforting people. Well, that's not exactly true. He's great at comforting other Aburame. They understand each other better than average people. Even if he wasn't a good comforting person to other people, he was able to do one thing efficiently, laying down hard facts. Well, I can't speak to how good a mother you will be. I'm sure that you're going to get some of the most help in raising your child in the world. Being in the alliance will not only justify it, but call attention to a need for it. As for whether or not Naruto will accept your pregnancy, I believe you are starting to think slightly irrationally. Naruto isn't the kind of person to reject it and demand an abortion. Fu wiped away the tears with her wrist and sniffled lightly. Thanks, Shino. A treetop fell remarkably close to them. A bird nest from securely in the uppermost branches fell in front of them. One of the eggs were cracked and started bleeding a yellow yolk. Is Kurtsuchi going to be alright? Shino asked. She said she didn't want to keep it, Fu said. Don't know why. She's going to wait until she can talk to Naruto before making the final decision though. Shino nodded to himself. Understandable. A friend barking started resounding from across the clearing. Kiba rode up on top of Akamaru and greeted them all amiably. You guys, what's up? Akamaru barked out a greeting as well. Nothing much, Fu said, surrounding far away. What's new? Me and Akamaru? Akamaru and I? Shut up, Shino. Akamaru and I found this awesome lake. Nobody's been there yet. We're going around to see if anyone wants to take a dip. Fu smiled brightly at Kiba. Sure, sounds like fun. She turned around and yelled at Kurtsuchi. Hey Kuro, we're going to a lake. Come with us. Kinda busy. Kurtsuchi shouted out in between huffs of air. No, you're not, Fu said forcefully. A purplish grey exoskeleton appeared on her from and several pairs of translucent orange bug wings popped out of notches in her back armor. Over her 2.5-year hiatus, she almost perfected her use of Biju, chakra, armor, and was now capable of spawning an almost imperishable set of exoskeleton armor that didn't leave a single inch of skin undercover. Sorry about the Biju thing because it was misspelled there. Anyways, back to the story. This impeded her movement, but when she got her wings back and under control while using the exoskeleton, the speed and agility came right back. She was the only person who neither Naruto nor Kurtsuchi could beat at close range. Fu had the affectionate nickname of the flying tank around the camp, for nothing sans heavily chakra-infused katana strikes could pierce her armor or do any actual damage. Kurtsuchi took a worried half step back. What do you mean? I mean you're coming with us to have fun in some water, Fu said menacingly. Heavy duty exercising isn't what you should be doing in your condition, I think. What condition? Kiba asked. If you got a skin thing, then she doesn't have a skin thing, Shino interrupted. Kiba gave her a skeptical look. Well, if you're okay for some swimming, you should join us. I really don't. Fu brought her exoskeleton hand out and held them at chest levels. 2 water swords spurted from her hands and began sharpening themselves menacingly. She knew the jutsu so well that she didn't even have to use the hands. Kurtsuchi placed her face in one of her palms. I guess I have no choice. The armor around Fu retracted into a red miasma of chakra and was reabsorbed into her body. Her grinning face was the first thing Kurtsuchi saw when the insectoid helmet withdrew into herself. Nope, you really don't. Link break. The sand was cool and silky to the touch, Yuichiro noticed. The fire that was keeping them warm was a nice orange color and held some lizard on them that Yuichiro caught for her, Temari, Naruto, and Sakura. She could almost taste the well-cooked meat from the succulent aroma coming from the fire. Perverted cats trembling within her head side. Yuichiro actually thought this little escapade was fun. While Fu and Kurtsuchi was yelling in the camp, they were having fun on a superficial level, she supposed. It was never fun having to wonder whether your friends were alive or dead. A bird landed beside her. She looked at it strangely. It was all white and bore resemblance to a seagull or other such sea animals. What would a sea animal be doing in the desert? Yuichiro started up her heat-sensing ability to scan the animal. Something just didn't seem right about it. There was no heat coming from the bird. Then there was a lot of heat coming from it, as it exploded rather violently by her side. There was less fire and more force behind the explosion, which is why she impacted a nearby sand dune instead of burning horribly. Although admittedly she wouldn't have been affected if it really was fire. Control over Matatabe's chakra allowed her to come impervious to heat higher than what she wanted to feel. The impact into the sand dune was at velocity several times higher than a cheetah, and caffeine running to catch dinner for her starving children. So the impact buried her several tons of feet into the sand dune as opposed to just laying her at the side of it, slightly stunned. The sand started to choke her system and her eyes only saw a thick blackness. She started thrashing her limbs around herself furiously, a very impressive feat considering she was buried under tons of sand, but wasn't able to get anywhere with it. It was like when you get hit by an errant wave and are sucked underwater with no way of knowing what way is up. Yusto thrashed and thrashed, but without knowing where she should be maneuvering herself, she got nowhere. In a last-ditch desperate attempt to stave off death by ambush, she ensured herself in Matatabe's chakra despite there being no air in the dune. The fire ignited and began heating everything around her to unbearable levels. The sand started turning gooey as it congealed into a molten glass. This gave her better push-off point, but was still unable to make any progress just getting out of the sand. Just as her oxygen supply began to run out in earnest, she felt a hand grasp her ankle and pushed rather painfully. Yusto was being pulled through the sand at fast rate, propelled by whatever was holding on to her. The sand parted and she was thrown into a field of even more sand. Their main difference being her ability to breathe, this time splurting out copious amount of sand and shaking off the last globus of molten glass off from her flaming coat. She took stock of the situation. There were about 20 or so flying puppets hovering in air, not doing anything other than watching as two other engaging Sakura below them. They all had some form of sharp thing coming out of them, and two Sakura was fighting seemed to know how to use them. Sakura, for her part, was doing marvelous job in dodging all the strikes and was even able to throw in a retaliatory shot every now and then. Next to the puppets was a giant bird flying in lazy circles, and on top of it sat Mad Bomber Deidara. He was engaging Temari as she took flying leaps into the air to accurately blast him with giant wind blades. She had been training rather extensively in 3D combat, being able to jump up in the air and hover for extended periods of time while she completed wind jutsu using her two fans. It was actually one of the more stupefying things that Yusto had ever seen in her life. Using her leg fan and her big fan to create enough push force to the ground to exceed the limitations of gravity never ceased to amaze her. Yujito, Naruto said, grabbing her upper arm to get her attention. You'll help Temari, I'll help Sakura. The arm that was holding on to her was his natural arm. His prosthetic hung limply at his side and was still covered in a white hot sand glass mixture. It didn't look like he could move it normally, but there was a faint whirring sound coming from it within, denoting that it was still operational. This was his new arm, the one that he had been working on extensively with. It sent vibration into the ground to give him a faint picture of where things were located, either on top of the soil or within it. The arm was supposed to supplement his earth walking technique, allowing him to attack people from under with greater precision. It wasn't the plan they cooked up before, although Yuto wasn't about to question it. Naruto probably had a better understanding of the situation and was able to take decisions based on the betterment than she. A leader's merit was only as great as her trust in her subordinates. Time being of the essence also helped with her compliance. Still ensured with a blue flame, she nodded and elongated her tails and nails to the point where they were so long and sharp as small daggers, and sped off where Temari was attempting to fight the Mad Bomber, only slightly cognized of Naruto slipping into the sand ground. Most fights between shinobi don't last very long, the longest average out being 20 to 30 seconds and 1 minute. Fights last longer than that are either results of weaker, more clever opponent, stronger, less clever opponent, or just when two shinobis who heavily rely on their individual fighting style or fight out in complementary ways. Temari and Deidara fight seemed to be the latter. He tried to get his bombs closer to her in order to explode them and kill her, while she tried her hardest to hit this slippery bastard without getting too close. Neither could get the upper hand because getting close could be lethal to both of them. Deidara, however, was more guarded than she was due to his lessened combat efficiency from losing an arm to Gaara. This fight would have lasted much longer were it not for Yusto coming to Tamari's aid. Over the course of the 2.5 years, she had learned much more close to mid-range fire jutsu. Generally, she preferred to fight up closely and personal. In fact, she only really knew 2 fire jutsu before the time skip. Everything else was trialed on by Matatabe's chakra. She was persuaded by Naruto to learn some of the other fire jutsus because of how compatible they would be with Tamari's own jutsu. Her Biju's chakra being incapable of being stoked by Tamari's wind for whatever reason, so they gained a sort of synchronous relationship with their fighting styles. Hellfire! Yujo screamed out in a raging purple inferno spread out from her mouth and body. It was her own chakra, even it didn't look strangely discolored. So Tamari dove above the inferno and flapped her leg in its direction. Since neither of them would have been able to get a bead on him, Yuji went for his wide area attack while Tamari used her in order to increase the magnitude of the fire. Deidara tried his best to swerve out of the way, but this proved to be for naught. The fire swamped both him and the bird he was flying on. Almost immediately, Deidara and his bird ballooned into a giant purple explosion. Yuichiro panted from her continued loss of breath, and Tamari alighted by the ground next to her. For a battle with one of the strongest people in the world, it was over fairly quick. Yuichiro didn't even need to use her nail daggers. Tamari grinned and held out her fist for bumping. We're pretty badass, huh? Yuichiro recuperated the fist and looked at Naruto's and Sakura's fight. The actual sorcery was now in the process of battling both Naruto and Sakura at the same time. He had discarded his cloak to show the strange outer puppet shell and all its fucked up glory. There were thin wires coming out of small punctures all over its body, meaning Naruto had already impaled him multiple times with seemingly no effect. There was also a limp body in between Naruto and Sakura and sorcery, probably belonging to Gaara. Yuichiro bipedal body structure morphed into a more quadrupled form, more resembling a gorilla gait than a cat. It would be better for her to be quadruped when fighting someone who was as well. Tamari unfolded her primary battle fan and nodded at Yuichiro. It was always better to take stock of a situation than head first like a certain brawl under Jinchuriki. Before Yuichiro could nod back, a white bug thing popped out of the ground behind Tamari and exploded. The blast, although seemingly non-lethal, succeeded in getting the wind mistress away from her source of fire jutsu. She hit the ground away with great velocities. Even though she immediately tried to get back up, her limbs didn't seem to respond to her at all too well. More bugs popped out of the sand and exploded, forcing Yuichiro to dodge erratically. Luckily for her, her quadruped more allowed her to bounce away and flip from the bombs as quickly as they could pop. Yuichiro growled and initiated her heat sensing organs. There was a heat signature coming from just above a dune to her right. She ran directly to the source of heat while dodging the explosive bugs continuously popping from the ground. Just as she was starting to climb over the lip of the dune, bugs popped out all around her, giving her no way of dodging. The bugs all burst into giant plumes of fire when they exploded, bathing Yuichiro in their white hot flames. Deidara, who was not very far from the source and covered in camouflage blanket, smirked and threw away the covering. He led her right into his trap. He had to duck immediately, however, in order to retain his head. Yuichiro now had 2 tails sprouted from her tailbone, still licked by the fire red flames, and covered herself from harm. Deidara backpedaled wildly and jumped off the lip of the dune, sliding down to Sasori's own fire. Time for tactical retreat. He was cut short, however, when he was literally cut short. Tamari had at some point gotten up and sent a gust of wind containing chakra blades at the blonde, cutting off one of his legs at the thigh. Before he could back out from the pain and the blood loss, he popped one of his last bugs up from the ground beneath Tamari and exploded it about her foot away from her head. She hit the ground much the same as the first time, but didn't get back up. Yuichiro almost yelled her frustration at the bomber. Instead, she decided just to kill him. She jumped from the lip of the dune and with her claws fully extended and on a path to impale the blonde. Before she could do anything, thin Sanbon suddenly hit her limbs and body wouldn't respond to her command anymore. The cat Jinchuriki landed in a clump to the side of Deidara, who had fallen unconscious by the time she hit the ground. Yujito used the last bit of her control to shift her head and look at Naruto's battle site. Sakura was laying limply at her side with a gash on her head, slipping blood on her face. It looked like a blunt force Tsurama would wound, and her chest was still rising and falling. She was still alive. Naruto was on his knee and breathing heavily, clutching his chest as similarly Senbon was struck into it. Oh no, this wouldn't do. Sasori didn't look any worse for wear, whereas all four of them had been incapacitated. Mata, are you there? Yoshiro mentally whispered. What do you need, kitten? Matatabe asked urgently. I can't use my body. I'm going to give you control. But don't engage that puppet guy. He's too dangerous. Get Naruto and the rest of them to safety. Yujiro had found out a while ago that even if her body was incapable of moving so long as she gave the regime to Matatabe, the truth is cat could move it for her. I'll try my best, kitten. Matatabe sounds scared, not exactly accompanied her to get them to safety. I hope Tamara is okay, was the last thought Yujiro had before Matatabe took complete control over her body functions. Kitten! 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 Yujiro! Yujiro shot upright and reached for the kunai hidden under her shirt, but grasped only a thin layer of the hospital clothing. Yujiro, are you alright? The woman in question winced in pain and clutched her head. I'm working, I think. Her eyes shot open as of what happened before she blacked out. What happened? Is Tamari okay? Did we get Gaara? Where's Naruto? Yujiro asked rapid fire to the entity sealed within her. You got ambushed by Akatsuki. Do you remember that much? I remember up until I blacked out. Okay, well after that I ran off to where you guys were heading before getting ambushed. I got a sight of Suna and ran as fast as I could towards it. I guess they didn't understand that I was an ally, so they got pretty rough with me. Are you okay? Of course I am. I'm one of the strongest beings in this world. A few rocks aren't going to hurt me. Tamari is okay. Got knocked out, but she's fine still out, I think. What about Gaara or Naruto, kitten? I'm going to say a few things and you can't interrupt me while I do so. Yujiro felt her stomach taken a sudden drop. Oh, okay. I got Naruto, Sakura, Tamari just fine, but I couldn't make it to Gaara. Naruto, he used substitution jutsu on Gaara. Yujiro's stomach did a backflip. Matatabe, does Akatsuki have Naruto? Kitten, I did the best I could. Yujiro's knuckles turned wide from how hard she was clenching onto the fabric of hospital smoke. Then she laughed, a very dark laugh that nobody interrupted because of the chill that sent down the spines of everyone who heard it. As she was getting off the dark laugh, she sent a thought to Matatabe. Well, you know what that means, don't you? Matatabe flames got bristled wordly. No, kitten. What does that mean? That just means we're going to have to save him. As this is where I'm going to be leaving this part of, guys. I hope you like this one, and if you do, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. And I'll see you in the next vid. This is Apollo Uchiha, and I'm signing out. Peace.